What's up, guys? Derek, moreplates.com. Today we're going to be going over Chris Cormier's cycle from the 90s, his performance-enhancing drug use, and just to give you guys some more insight. I feel like the more people that can shed light on exactly what happened, the better, in terms of guys with hyper response and crazy genetics and people who've been at the Olympia level and have Olympia caliber physiques. It's just extremely enlightening. Every single, account I hear of from these guys, it's information you're not going to get anywhere else. And like, people can, guess all they want what these guys took, but at the end of the day, hearing it from their mouths themselves is the best way we can, actually figure out what happened and make an educated assessment for our own, use and potentially not using moving forward. So that's kind of the whole point of this video, is to bring to light the truth of the matter. So anyway, without getting too far into it, let's get this started here.
We're going to address a lot of sensitive issues today, and I want to assure you.
By the way, don't know for sure this is Chris Cormier. This is just what the internet seems to think based on mannerisms, how he sounds, how he looks underneath this filter here. So even though the title of the video is Chris Cormier, it might not actually be him, so take it with a grain of salt. I'm just reacting as if I'm assuming that it might be, so I'm just going to react as if it is him. So just keep that in mind.
That your identity will be protected in terms of the viewing audience, okay? It's important to me, otherwise I wouldn't agree to do this. So often the issue is not addressed. The steroid issue in all sport form today is avoided, not addressed, not talked about, as if it doesn't exist. And having seen a lot of close friends of mine encounter some problems recently, I feel personally strongly that the issue should be addressed in terms of honesty, in terms of education for future upcoming athletes, and that's not done enough. And so, if we can do that today, which we will, by not exploiting who you really are, and if we openly and honestly, that's the reason that's the way I would like to proceed, and that's the reason I'm here in the first place. And I hope you understand that. And I do thank you very much for being here and agreeing to be candid with us, of course, with your identity completely disguised.
Thanks.
Thank you. First of all, the question I have to ask you is, what brought you to the steroid table in the first place?
Well, it's when I was young, I always liked muscle. I was always intrigued by strength and the whole, cartoon character look of the strength, just muscle in general. And I didn't know much about anything that can, help you get bigger or whatever, other than the protein drinks and the liver pills that that was available through the stores at the time. And I was lifting weights as a kid, started at a young age. And once I got to college, someone pointed out an individual who was pretty large, and they said, yeah, he takes anabolic steroids. And so right then and there, I was like, okay, I got to find out what this is about, So I started reading about it and looking at different bodybuilders in the magazines, and figuring, okay, this is what's going on. So I read about it for a few years before I tried it.
How old were you when you first started your first steroid cycle?
I was 18.
Okay, and that was you were competing then.
So that's, I think, the youngest so far out of all of these interviews.
I competed before I took anything. I was I trained for about 5 or so years, and I started competing for about 2 years. People were taking steroids, this and that. I was like, man, maybe that's why I'm taking second and not winning or something like that. And I didn't have any idea what was what was behind getting that harder look of the muscle, or losing more water between the muscle and the skin, that type of thing.
Okay. So it was basically, in order to compete on the bodybuilding stage, if everyone else is doing it, you have to do it to get that edge. Am I hearing you correctly?
Basically, and you know, I wanted to see, you know, what would happen if I took more, or if I took something, or whatever, you know, just like everyone else was doing. So but like I said, I tried to take the smarter route and at least be educated about what I was getting into, and so that, you know, like I said, I read about it for a good 2 years, 2.5 years before I tried anything.
Okay. Again, proceeding with our basic statements and thoughts we were aligning ourselves with, my next question would be, what kind of steroids by name have you found most effective in your training?
Right now or back then?
Well, I guess all through the course of your career.
The Dynaball, which is always you know, like the first thing a lot of people take, or
So it was like a staple of the 70s, 80s era, I think.
you know, a personal favorite, that Equipoise.
I think he's the first one who said EQ. And it's kind of interesting because it's like, I don't even know if I'd combine those, to be honest. It's just like one's the oral version of the same drug, essentially, and they both fulfill the same mechanism of action, so they kind of overlap, and it's not anyways, I'm gonna let him continue before I comment too much.
There's regular testosterone, different types of testosterone cypionate and things of that nature. The Winstrol and the more hardy drugs like say back then we can get stuff like Finajet and you know, different things like that.
Finajet or Finaject, I don't know what he just said, but I'm pretty sure it was Finaject, is Trenbolone. So it's the human approved version was Parabolin, made in France by Negma, I believe. After that was discontinued, what a lot of guys did was they would get Finaplex H pellets, which are still available for veterinary use in beefing up cattle, and people would use these conversion kits to change these pellets into basically human usable versions of Trenbolone, and they would often go by the name of Finaject, I believe. I believe that is the origin of how kind of like veterinary use kind of migrated into human use. And if you actually go to I believe it's Merck's website, you can still see, I actually did a video on this recently, you can still see Finaplex H pellets that are sold for beefing up cattle. So still around to this day. It was just never approved for human use in that context, like having a literal like pellet being converted for a human. It was always the Parabolin was the human approved one, and that was discontinued in the 90s, and then I guess they started to go towards the veterinary stuff after that. EQ, also veterinary drug, at least in modern times. But anyways.
But a lot of it's hard to find now is a number of, you know, different kinds I tried, but now you just go for what's available, what you think is real, or you know, sometimes a lot of things not even real, what you're taking and you thought you was taking something.
Yeah.
So go for what you can. It sounds like the accessibility was limited back then. It was like these guys take what they can get kind of thing. So interesting, because these are like all top Olympia guys. So it's like for them to say you take what you can find and what's available. Like if they're having availability issues, you can just imagine what the average Joe is trying to go through to get whatever.
It's a definite concern. I can understand that. So basically, it's what's available and what you can get a hold of, and hopefully it's real.
Right. Parabolins and Primobolin used to be able to get like back in the day. There's the growth hormone, which is now playing a key role in a lot of people's.
So yeah, all the Parabolin came from France, I believe.
Arsenal.
Yeah, exactly.
And you know, it's
let's talk about, like, currently, what you're using and what kind of dosages you might be using in terms of the androgenic and the anabolic material as such.
Currently, I could take hormone and use about 9 IUs a day.
How long might that be for?
As long as you can afford it.
Yes, I can understand that. So prior to a contest only?
So 9 IUs, that's pretty high, definitely, in my opinion.
It all depends. I've used it in the off season. I use it for competition.
What's better results for you?
I like to use it during getting ready for competition because seem to burn off more body fat, and your energy levels are high, your nitrogen levels are high, you're really energetic, and you're strong. And
can you eat anything you want to when you're...
See, it's interesting to hear him say that, energetic, because I feel like for most people, once you get over like 4 or 5 IUs of like high quality pharma grade GH, you get tired and lethargic. That's like literally what, like, think about what happened when you release the most GH. It's when you're sleeping. Like, this is a hormone that makes you tired and spikes your blood sugar. Like, this isn't something that gives you tons of energy as like a pre-workout. So it's kind of interesting to hear him say that. Like, typically one of the biggest limiting factors of people using growth is insulin resistance and lethargy. So interesting to hear him say that.
You're on growth hormone?
Can
Can you eat anything you want to?
I do it anyway. I tend to be able to cheat a little bit more. And I've been getting really good results from it. Yeah. That and that's my favorite, like Anadrol, the different types of Anadrol that's available now.
Staying with it before we go into the steroids, the GH or the growth hormone.
Okay.
It's like if you're, I realize that if you could take it all year long, you take it all year long. If you could afford it, would just. Am I hearing you
I
right?
probably wouldn't myself. No, I'm not like a person who would. That's my favorite thing to do is take a lot of drugs and this type of nature.
God, I don't mean to say it that way.
Well, no. I don't know. I probably could if I were, but that's very expensive to do something like that.
Well,
Doing 9 units year round, you would probably end up in danger zone for insulin resistance, in my opinion. So just heads up on that.
for an event nowadays, like say, and we don't want to name
How far out? Or
How far out?
maybe 12 weeks out.
Okay, 12 weeks out and 9 IUs a day. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that's pricey for sure.
Yeah.
Now moving on from the growth hormone, stepping back into the steroid arena, prior to an event, are the steroids different than they would be in the off season?
You would cycle. Well, personally, I would start out like 15 weeks out
Okay.
if I had my way.
Okay, let's go.
15 weeks out, and I would use the heavier, more water-retentive type substances about
Like,
for the fur, like the D-ball, the Ecupores, Anadrol. I would use Clenbuterol with that, and I would start switching to more hard.
Clenbuterol at 15 weeks out is kind of interesting, as I feel like most guys wouldn't add that in until closer to the tail end. But everything else he's saying is pretty consistent with the other guys as far as, long esters and things that hold more nitrogen, more water retention further out from the show.
Hardening things like halotestin and cytogen and Winstrol and
Halotestin, Winstrol, I'm aware of. I don't know what cytogen is, though.
Primobolan and Cytomel. I would start that.
Cytomel, T3.
That's all in my. And I want to when I'm starting the phase into getting a little harder.
which is like,
Usually like around 8 to 6 weeks out.
okay.
I started like this cytogen. I would take it like 5 weeks out or something like that. And
Now,
and that's even pushing it a little bit.
okay. Do you usually start with a lower dosage, go high, and then regress, or?
I don't take a lot of my dose. Like for testosterone, I'll probably take about maybe a couple cc's twice a week or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
See, it's funny. Something I realize is most of these guys quantify just in volume, like not even the doses. They're like, oh yeah, I have like a cc here, 2 cc's a week. It's like Tom has to like dig to get an answer in like milligrams. And it's kind of interesting how they quantify things back then in cc's, as if like that's like one dose is like 1 cc kind of thing, which is interesting. Anyway.
It's, you know, and a lot of people might take more or less or whatever, but testosterone, I've always, or at a young age even, I was told to take as little as possible to get the effects that you're looking for. You know, so that's my first instinct is to do that with most of the drugs that I take. And then from there I would, you know, if 4 uses is not working for me, or if, like say 200 milligrams is not doing good for me, and I'll be up to 400 milligrams, or, you know, or something like that. Or,
do you have a formula, like a daily milligram allotment, or do you?
I used to, and now it's just like, okay, Mondays and Thursdays I'm going to be doing this and that. I'm going to kick in this or whatever, and I'm also looking at the mirror, seeing, you know, over the years you learn how to, you know, say, hey, I'm holding a lot more water from, you know, this might be the reason, so I'm going to take that out and put this in, you know, sort of like a recipe or something.
Okay. Well, like in the off season with the more strength enhancing, the bulking type agents or drugs, give me some idea, if you would, please, if you would share with us some idea of the dosages of those things, and then we'll move on to the pre-contest.
Well, testosterone can be anywhere from, say, 600 milligrams, 800 milligrams a week of testosterone. Primobolan, I would like to take about, say, 400 milligrams a week. So like equipoise, I would probably do like a full syringe full twice, 2-3 times a week.
Full syringe, meaning
It
what?
depends. Like say it depends. Like if it's like a 50 milligram deal or whatever. But you know, equipoise is not. It's not like really high on androgens, but it's like a mixture of both. And so I tend to just bring all it in, you know, cc's 2 to 3 times a week of that. If I was kicking in some.
I don't know if the EQ was concentrated at 50 milligrams per milliliter or something. It's kind of interesting because pretty much every UGL does like 200 to 300. And then here he's talking about 50, unless I'm misinterpreting what he said. But sounds like so far we're at like 1,600 to 2,000 approximately per week.
Then I would do, say, 4. I'll start off around 4 IUs per day, and work my way up to 9 or so.
The growth hormone does go up and then stops.
Well, yeah, you know, I like to go about 8 to 10 weeks with hormone. And then once you start to come off of it, you lose a little bit of water. But the size and the strength usually stays there pretty good with the growth hormone. And, you know, my off-season cycles, you know, I like to take around 4 to 5 different types of steroids at one time.
Is it like 2 androgenic and 2 anabolic, or?
It'll keep it pretty even like that.
Off-season?
Yeah.
Okay. And as you move into the season, the heavier androgenics are come out to some degree?
Yeah, heavy that way, and then, but at the same time, you know, I like for DECA even, I would probably do, say, about 400 milligrams or 400 to 800 milligrams per week of the DECA alone.
And that's usually starting closer to the contest.
Exactly.
These are all pretty standard, honestly. Like, some of these are even low. Like, I know tons of guys who they think EQ is useless under 700. They think Primo's useless under 900. DECA is like 400 minimum, and like all these crazy things. And these guys are using pretty much what like newbies and like random dudes who just are gym rats are using. And it's like the same amounts, plus like some GH, obviously, which a lot of people don't use or don't have access to. But the gear itself is pretty interesting.
Okay, so before a contest, it might mean 8 weeks in, the DECA, you mentioned, I think, Winstrol?
Winstrol, yeah.
And that would be like cc's of that would be approximately.
See, that's again, that's it's usually like 50 milligrams per bottle. You're taking about 2 or 3 bottles per time, like 3 times a week or so.
Okay. So if you're using 2.
So the Winstrol's 50 mgs per milliliter, and 2 to 3 bottles a few times a week. So you're at like 300 to 450 per week, approximately, depending.
Androgenics and 2 anabolics prior to during the off season, before the event, 8 weeks in, you're using more hardening agents, as you called it, or more anabol. That would be how many agents, roughly? I know it changes from.
And that depends on what's available at the time and what's in your budget for your competition. So let's say, you know, if you're training for a show and you have halotestin, cytogen, some type of
Halotestin.
clenbuterol. Halotestin, I like to take about 30 to 40 milligrams per day.
Okay.
I've always heard guys say don't go over 20, because 20 is like a threshold where you start getting into like really toxic territory, and to only use it like 2 weeks out. It's like the rule of thumb. So 30 to 40, that seems pretty high. But that's something I have a lot less experience researching, to be honest. So it seems like a pretty high dose for that.
Starting from about 5 weeks out or so.
Okay. Fine, it's a hardening type agent.
Yeah.
Okay.
And cytogen, that's about 4 weeks out, and I'm starting out at 50 milligrams. And you start off at 1, going up to 2. You like to go 2 on, 1 off with that. And that's pretty hard on your system, so you want to kind of, you know, not stay on that too long. And then the cytogen, the cytogen also it's also needed for the extra body fat that you're burning, and also it works really well with the growth hormone also. And I would say a lot of people, you know, used to take a lot of Novadex and Provider and stuff like that for extra hardening effects. You know, I've used both of those at different times. And what else?
Well, okay. So many different ways to go in this.
Yeah.
I mean, so is there any time during the year when you for sure don't take steroids? And
Right after, getting ready, coming down to competition, like the last week or so, discarded all the steroids, and you know, you tend to look a little harder because it's all making you hold some kind of water, some kind of in some kind of area.
is there a number of months during the year that you don't take steroids at all?
Yeah, I've done that during the course of my career. I've actually taken a lot of time. Sometimes I'd do a 12-week cycle and I would go off for 12 weeks. You know, and I would.
So there's no exact estimate change.
Right. It changes, and as you develop and grow bigger, you start to change the way you do a lot of things and take a lot of different things, and you know.
Since we've been speaking about GH to some degree already, off-season and on-season, we discussed drugs, steroids in terms of off-season versus on-season, and sort of your cyclic pattern, which changes a great deal. My next question would be insulin. Is that ever a consideration in your program?
Yes, I've used it for contest prep as far as starting my cycles off with you know, helping you gain a little bit more weight before you start to cut down. And it's, you know, really well. It's just really dangerous for a lot of people to use it, and you really have to know what you're doing if you're starting to step into that arena.
So you only take it when you're getting size?
I did that, but I also took it during, you know, a carb up phase during competition.
Okay, but you don't take it other than maybe the last week before a show then?
No, the last week, the last few days before the show.
And then maybe in the off season for how long?
It's for a few weeks. I never took a long cycle of it, and it's not my favorite thing to do.
Okay.
See, it's interesting because a lot of guys think that these guys are on like Atlantis with their GH like pretty much year round. to gain massive amounts of size and crank their IGF-1 up. And it seems like the insulin use is actually really conservative, or perhaps it's just the taboo drug. So no one wants to come clean about how they actually use it. I don't really know for sure, but no one seems to have very aggressive insulin use so far. And that's out of every person in this series.
Doing all that stuff, watching yourself if you're going to fall asleep or not. It's just something that's really dangerous. It's really dangerous. And
about dosage as far as insulin?
Dosages, I would go about, if I was going to take it in all season, I was going to do about three or 4 times a day. And I'd space it out every 6 hours or so for about 12 to 15 IUs, I believe, or something.
Okay, I'm not sure the measurement.
On a syringe, you're going to see 10, 20, 30.
Okay.
I would take between the 10 and the 20.
Okay.
No more than that, though.
And that was a 3.
That's actually, okay, well, it's funny. I just said that they don't use that much because it's not nothing. 12 to 15, 3 times a day. Like, that's, pretty considerable. Granted, the duration of time, though, doesn't seem as, you would assume these guys are using it much more than just, like, a few sporadic, like for carbing up or for like a few weeks a year. But that's more in line with what I'd expect, like several dosages throughout the day of probably like a fast acting with each meal or something like that. Or I was expecting somebody to have been on like Atlantis 24/7 to accommodate all their meals, but doesn't seem like that's anyone's going to be doing that.
3 times a day?
Yeah.
Okay.
Early in the morning, then in the afternoon, and then in the evening.
Is it after workout, before workout?
I've done it. I've tried it that way also. I tried it in the middle of my workout even. Mm-hmm. And so when you're timing it for within that 20 minutes, you're going to be done and you're going to start eating. Mm-hmm. And that seemed to work pretty good too. But I never really, ventured off into getting really serious about doing the insulin deal.
Mm-hmm. So it was just sort of something you played with?
Yeah, I played with, but never really seriously seeing the actual effects of what can be done or whatever.
For somebody on 9 IUs of GH though, again, that's somebody who could probably benefit from insulin, not just in a performance enhancing context, but health standpoint, because that's a lot of stress on your pancreas if you have chronically elevated blood sugar from that much growth hormone like all day. So,
but I do know the dangerous sides of it. Mm-hmm. Because I've seen a lot of people get a lot of bad reactions from it, and been in put themselves in dangerous positions from it. I've seen it firsthand, so I do know not to mess with it too much.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, the next item I'd like to discuss with you would be the use of diuretics. Is that been something you've utilized?
Oh yeah, I've used that since I was a teenager. I started using it. I've never really had a problem with it. I never took a lot. I never took over 75 milligrams of like aldactone. Mm-hmm. 75 milligrams has been the most I've taken per day of that. My body's really sensitive to it. It was a lot of water. Mm-hmm. And I never had a lot of problems with cramping or anything like that a lot of people have associated with diuretic use.
And the aldactone is used the last week prior to a
I
show?
started, like the Tuesday on to the show. Mm-hmm. And then say a Friday or so, I would start with a little bit of diazide. Mm-hmm. And even a diazide capsule, I'd open it up and empty a little.
That's the classic protocol again. It's like the same thing, honestly. It seems like everyone's more or less doing the same thing. It's just like the difference comes down to genetics, it seems like, to be honest. And I don't think a lot of people, I feel like that's definitely the takeaway message from this series here.
Bit out of it, and so I wouldn't be as strong as normal. Mm-hmm. And that's just something I've always been really sensitive about taking, because it tend to take a lot.
By the way, just for my own input, if I was competing, for example, and I was going to do a peak week, I would avoid aldactone. Like, I think it sucks personally. The diazide, like half a diazide the night before if you actually need it, kind of makes sense. But to me, I feel like a week out, you should be lean enough and already stage ready and kind of like cruise into the show. And I feel like L-Dactone has more negatives than positives, and the diazide more than accomplishes the goal of, you know, getting that extra crispy, dry, grainy look that, you know, the L-Dactone might achieve, but it's a lot harder to fill out on L-Dactone, at least in my experience, and I feel like it's a subpar diuretic that's overly used, and that's just my personal opinion, though.
A lot of water out of the muscle also is, you know, is just as much as it takes it from between the muscle and the skin. You're gonna lose a bit of size, and
Right.
so
Right.
I've never been, you know, a big fan of taking a lot of milligrams when it comes to diuretics.
But mainly prior to an event, you find that that's the L-Dactone and the little diazide is effective.
Yeah, very effective, very effective. It's the difference between a couple placings if you didn't take it. Definitely.
Now that I understand they're testing for diuretics in the Olympia only, exclusively, how do you get around that?
No, they're doing it for
Okay.
most. Sometimes if you go to a show and they don't test it, you know, you don't know about it though.
Huh.
And you know, who's to say if you know if they're really testing for it or not? But you know, there are times when people have gotten caught for taking things.
Is there any specific way or masking agent for diuretics or a way to get around being...
Not that I know of.
Okay.
Not that I know of. I think if you lower your sodium a lot more than normal and play with that number and take a lot of the natural diuretics that's available over the counter, that with a combination with you know, other things. You know, it's hard to. I've used insulin, and the insulin tends to suck a little bit of water from into the muscle from in between the skin and the muscle, and so it helps the muscle fibers look as though the skin is tighter around it.
This is with...
I use insulin and the
diuretic?
with the natural diuretic.
I see.
With, you know, just all those together to tend to give you a pretty good tight look.
Okay. So, if you do take diuretics prior to a show, they're usually natural diuretics and not L-Dactone or the diazide.
I've tried that also. I tried it to where I stopped use of diuretic on that Wednesday, and I was tested on a Saturday, and it wasn't in my system. But then between the Wednesday and Saturday, your water intake has to be at an all-time low. I tried that with taking. The only thing I drank from the Wednesday to the Saturday was a diuretic tea. I tried that, and it seemed to work pretty well. I only tried it once though, and just trying different ways to, you know, get the best results.
I guess my question would be, do you think the diuretic test is real?
I think it's real.
Okay.
I don't want to test, you know, risk losing all the money or, you know, it's not saying, because there's not much, you know, discipline behind getting busted for it, but it's, losing that money is that's the biggest thing at this point in time.
As a pro athlete, I understand, sure. Anything really scary ever happened to you with diuretic use or GH use or insulin use?
I mean, you feel the effects when you take insulin, as far as you get lightheaded, sweating a lot, you're scrambling to get some kind of...
So, feeling the effects of insulin, if you feel your insulin, you're not taking it right. Just a heads up there. Like, if you're taking the fact that he's saying this, I don't know if that's consistent with every time he took it, but if he was taking like 12 to 15 IUs of Humalog, I would understand why he would be going hypo like fairly often. But you shouldn't feel, you know, low blood sugar symptoms because you shouldn't be using enough insulin that drops your blood sugar that low, or you should be eating enough carbs to complement it. And at that point, you're kind of defeating the purpose of the insulin in the first place, which is to drive your current nutrients into the muscle more efficiently and partition nutrients. It shuttles what you already take in if you add in carbs around your insulin use, you're kind of defeating the purpose and working against yourself. Like your current diet, however much food you need to grow, your insulin dose should accommodate that amount of carbohydrates, not the other way around where you have some arbitrary dosage like 12 to 15 IUs, and then you're forcing yourself to have to take in an extra 120 to 150 grams of carbs to make sure you don't end up with low blood sugar symptoms. So just keep that in mind, because that's a huge mistake guys make, is they eat around their insulin dose, which is an arbitrary dose to begin with, rather than having their dose based around their diet, which is how a diabetic uses it and how it's intended to be used. So you shouldn't ever be going like low, like hypoglycemic because you want to feel it. Like you shouldn't be feeling this at all.
Sugar in your system or whatever. I've always had, when I got checkups for steroids, I've always had, great results from that. Everything's always been fine.
So you do recommend checkups?
Yeah, I definitely recommend checkups. Not so much right when you're in the competition phase, because you're taking a lot of different steroids, and the results you're going to get back is going to be pretty alarming, probably, because it's not going to be normal. But after you discard taking anything for, say, 6 to 8 weeks or so, and then you go to the doctor or whatever, then I think if everything's back to normal, I think you're doing pretty much the right thing. Some people are getting, some bad results as far as their different, the sperm count now, and their liver panel results are coming back, still kind of high. That's, you need to take a look back and see, is this all worth it for you? Or, you're getting, is the push and shove is, really...
Is the risk worth the benefit?
Worth it, yeah.
How do you feel about competing in today's arena, today's stage?
The only thing that the problem I have when people are acting like it's all about drugs, and it seems to put a bad taste in your mouth when you see people that they just really they brag about it, and they like to take steroids, they like to do this and that, because I'm still one of the guys that like to push hard and train intensely, and I still want to see exactly what I can do as far as I can push myself to get the development that I was looking for, and from when I started this whole crusade.
Do you ever think to yourself that geez, I think we're pushing genetics to the ultimate edge, that it's getting pretty risky?
Sometimes, yeah.
Like when he has problems, or like Ahmed Benaziza or Andreas Moons, or does it like make you think, take 2 steps backwards and go, wait a minute?
Yeah, definitely. You have to. You'd be crazy not to. And you'd think that, it won't happen to me. I think it could happen.
If you don't know who Andreas Munzer is, I highly recommend you go look at his story. He's an example of a guy who basically redlined his body for bodybuilding like year round. And the infamous Andreas Munzer death cycle, I don't know if it's legitimate or not. I should do a video on that too, realistically. But his use was example of just insane levels of abuse. And it, ended his life in his 30s. And that's what they're referring to right here. And obviously the goal is to have a good, healthy life while not becoming a bodybuilding statistic. You know what I mean? So that's obviously majorly the purpose of these interviews in the first place, rather than to, shed light on dosages like you should be using or whatever. Like, they're not trying to promote use. They're trying to shed light on the deaths themselves. And I'm surprised that these guys weren't brought up earlier. Like, this is the first interview where they brought up like notable deaths from a result of abuse. So definitely keep note of that.
Not for anyone.
And is there any suggestions, any words of wisdom you might give our viewers who are looking at you guys? That's where I want to be in life.
I think that first of all, I would suggest, if you really don't have what it takes to be one of those guys, you need to really be honest with yourself and say, I could appreciate what they're doing, but it is not for me to step, that far into what's dangerous and what's, logical, what's, you know, what's good for yourself. You know? And then secondly, I suggest if you did, you know, want to compete and you're not going to go pro and, you know, whatever, I wouldn't do anything dangerous, and I wouldn't do, if you plan on taking anything, first of all, I suggest not to, you know, because it's better not to, and you live longer and you gotta, you know, like, you know, you're gonna have a lot easier life all around if you didn't. But if you did choose to, then I would suggest, you know, take it as little as possible to get some results that you're looking for, like I said.
So you think the steroids and the GH and the insulin and other agents can limit your life and put more stress on your body?
I would assume.
Okay, I mean, I'm you know, understand, of course, and you know, I've been where you are. I retired some time ago, but I'm watching our sport progress, and you know, it seems to have gotten to the point now where it's, I don't know, you should answer this rather than maybe, is it chemical warfare now?
In some ways, yeah, I would say, yeah. I mean, when you're out there away from home and you're taking different things, and you know, I've been places and you get a lot of bloody noses and things of that nature. You know, you sort of think, oh my God, you know what's going on, or you know, that can scare you after a while.
If you get a bloody nose while you're running gear, I can almost guarantee it's blood pressure related, by the way. So check your blood pressure, because that's something probably the number one thing that's going to screw people over in bodybuilding is having unaddressed high blood pressure. And it's a super easy thing to remedy, and it goes completely overlooked quite often because guys will just walk around with, you know, stage 1, stage 2 hypertension and not even realize it. And then, you know, my friend at age 21 had a pulmonary embolism from having a blood clot in his calf that traveled up to his brain that he had no idea was there because he was walking around with chronically high blood pressure. And I'm not sure if he was on gear at the time, but, you know, it was 100% preventable. You don't want something like that to happen to you, obviously. So keep an eye on your blood pressure. It's like a super easy thing to maintain too, just by getting in your magnesium, your potassium, your sodium, your water, your etc., and having a proper diet and avoiding excessively aromatizing compounds and just not being stupid and keeping an eye on your blood pressure. So keep that in mind.
On an annual basis, like
when I was younger, I remember literally walking in, I'd be in like university sitting in class, and I'd just like randomly get a nosebleed because my blood pressure was so high from the D-ball I was on, and I'd get like a nosebleed in the squat rack too when I was doing my sets. And even when I was a bouncer downtown, I remember there was like a couple times I'd have to like go to the bathroom in the middle of my shift because my nose would just start bleeding while I was standing at the front door. Just brutal. So don't put yourself in that situation.
If we look at the last few years back, understanding the growth hormone and the expense of that, I think you mentioned, up to 9 cc's.
9 IUs, yeah.
Oh, 9 IUs, I'm sorry. You can tell growth wasn't around when I was competing. At least it was around when I bought a new car instead.
Right. Yeah.
What's the annual expenditure, approximately, on getting ready for an event?
So it's interesting, I used to call him Lee Priest. Tom Platz just said it was around in his era, and his era was like 80s. So a lot of people think that no one used growth hormone in the 80s and it was like a 90s thing only. So kind of interesting. I'm wondering what kind of, it's almost like he should do his own thing where he talks about what guys used in his era, because that'd be interesting too. I think there are some. Maybe I'll go look a bit further and see if I can find any. If you guys know of any good Tom Platz interviews where he was talking about his own use that you'd want me to react to, let me know in the comments down below, because you know, obviously that would be make for a good video for sure too.
A rough number on that?
Close around 5,000 to some people might go up to 10,000 or so.
So you see,
At least 5,000.
that's even with the growth hormone being involved, you know?
That's at a minimum, yeah.
So you say 5,000 to 10,000 minimum?
Yeah.
So it could go as high as,
Depends on the person, you know.
I mean, I heard
It
people
can
say
go up.
$100,000. I guess it's
It
possible.
can go up. But some of the things I've done with 5,000 in that area.
I understand.
That's all drug use, yeah. Depending on what kind of deals you're getting, and
what's available, and of course, how much the price of it, and
and like I said, it's, I don't think, and that's not even a big number for what I'm doing. That's what I've achieved on that amount of money of stuff is, I think it's pretty good.
In your view, do you think it would be healthier if it was not such a classified as a class 3 drug, and it was more through doctor medical intervention?
In other countries, it's available like that, and have doctors and people that work closely with you, because people are gonna do it anyway. They're gonna do it no matter what the cost, no matter what kind of trouble you can get into. It's gonna happen. You see it every day.
100% agree with that.
In bodybuilding, but it's also in baseball and football and track and things like that. Sports like that, gymnastics, they're getting caught all the time, swimming and all that stuff.
You think it's worse now than it's ever been in all sports?
Definitely. There's junior high school kids taking pills and doing whatever, and it's amazing.
And how old do you think a person should be to consider a possible steroid program? We're not making recommendations here, of course. We're not pro-steroids. We're merely talking about reality. But
I would suggest educating yourself on as long as you can stand it, and wait as long as you can. If you can be in your mid-20s or upper 20s, then that'd be a lot better than starting off early teens and whatever.
Okay.
I mostly agree with that. I did a video on this recently too about how, when you should start. Granted, that's actually kind of misinterpreting what I was kind of trying to come across with that video. It's not about when. I'm not trying to say you should start and imply that you should be starting. The entire point of the video was to imply, if you're dead set on doing it, regardless of what people advise, then take these precautions into consideration, was my context of that. But basically, the chances of you having the knowledge to, first of all, even implement pharmacology in a safe and effective manner where you're probably not just wasting it, or at least the majority of it, is very unlikely at a young age, regardless of how much research you think you've done. I promise you, it takes years to understand this stuff thoroughly. And as well as diet and training. The diet and training part itself takes a couple of years at least to really come into your own and understand. It's not just about hitting your macros. It's not just about getting enough protein in. It goes far beyond that. And, the pharmacology is a whole new ball game. And even once you get into that, it's you think you know everything, and then you learn a million new things over the next 5 to 10 years. And that's I'm still learning to this day. And I, don't even think I would have constituted my knowledge of when I did as thorough enough. And I wish I waited till a lot later to get into that realm. And I advise you check out that video. I think it was the number one tip I have before you start steroids or something like that. But go check out that video if you haven't.
So, I understand you do have health concerns, and it makes total sense that you would have health concerns, and that you look at the risk versus the benefit, and this is your chosen profession, and you pursue it along those lines. I think every athlete I speak with feels the same way, and I hear that coming from you, a concern, but yet you're not out to commit suicide.
Right, exactly.
You've got to do it as strategically and as healthy as possible in order to compete in that arena.
Right.
This stuff that we read about in the magazines called roid rage, does that really exist in your opinion?
I think it exists, but I think a lot of individuals that already have temper, and it's just heightened. I think it's something you got to learn how to control, because it is an aggressive drug. It can make you really aggressive. You're already aggressive, then you're going to be, stand at risk and get really upset and not be able to control yourself. I remember the first 2 years when I was taking it, I had to be wait a minute, and a little bit more excited than, it's just someone crossing the street, But it's, I think it's real. But I think people label a lot of people having roid rage when it's not really roid rage. I think you don't even have to be on a cycle to get really mad.
Yeah, it definitely just exacerbates your current state or what kind of a person you are, in my opinion. I don't think it's going to make some really chill, mellow dude a psycho at all. I think it's going to make a guy who's a psycho more of a psycho, though, for sure.
People prove that every day in the news.
I think it enhances your natural aggressiveness.
Exactly.
Definitely.
You know, or your natural personality to some degree.
Definitely.
One of the things that I also want to discuss, would be masking agents of any kinds. I mean, granted, you're able to get around the diuretic test based upon, limiting the time you're on certain diuretics and taking other situations. Are there any masking agents that you ever utilized that were of benefit?
I'm not sure why this is such a prominent question. Like, I'd have never, well, granted, maybe there is something, but I don't think there's anything that's going to, like, trick a test into thinking there's nothing in your system if the test was, a legitimate test to begin with. Like, how could you take a Lasix and then, like, pop another pill and have it, like, trick a test into not thinking there's Lasix in your system? I don't know. Seems like kind of a, odd question.
No. You hear about things, this and that, but I'm not one to try to take a chance on something like that.
Mm-hmm. How about things like escalene, where you inject into the muscle itself to temporarily in the tissue? And does that have any benefit in your protocol?
Yeah, that's definitely another benefit that people can, it probably put you up another spot or two if you had it basically, and then you had the right, put it in the right places, and but a lot of people are abusing different substances like that, and it just don't look, it's not what we started out to do. If that was the case, then why even try to train your calves when you're just sticking them with all kinds of different things? And I'm like I said, I still like to see what I can do myself. And
it makes me, when you said that, I still like to see what I could do myself. If there was a test where nobody could take anything, otherwise they'd be busted immediately. If there was a really test that would create a fair playing field, and if drugs were completely eradicated, would you be in favor of that?
oh, I love it. Yeah, let's see what we all can do.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
I've often thought about that. If we could really have a test where no one could really pass the test and use any kind of drugs. And guys like yourself that they're doing real well. They're competing in the top shows and placing real high. And it's getting old.
Oh yeah, I would love that.
That's what I hear, and that's sort of the way I feel. But I'm not
But
going to.
just like I said, if everyone's falling by the rules and everyone's gonna do,
Right.
exactly what that would be great.
Just an interesting point that you brought up that I sort of thought about for a second. Besides the drugs like the steroids and the GHs and the insulin and the diuretics, are there any other like androstenedione, or is there anything like that you've utilized that what you feel is definitely worthy of calling a steroid-like substance?
I think androstenedione is good. I've tested myself and only using androstenedione for a period of time and training totally without steroids, and I would push some pretty good weight. Yeah.
Do you ever use it in conjunction with the steroids?
No.
So it's usually in the off season.
Yeah, definitely. If I were going to use androstenedione, I'd use it by itself.
In the off season, after you've been taking steroids, during pre-season and the steroid contest is over, are there basically agents you use to bring your testosterone back to natural levels, or HCG, or?
Yeah, I've used HCG over the Clomid. I used those two
together.
I used them together before. I used pretty good amounts of HCG. Yeah, it's good. If you can get a hold of it or whatever. Then I just relax for a while and just take time off.
Just let it go back naturally.
Yeah.
What are like some of the amounts of Clomid or HCG? Or any idea of dosages? Do you recall?
Ooh, you get like 10,000 I use the HCG, and I take that a couple times per week.
I thought maybe he was just going to completely forget about the dosages because he doesn't actually PCT, but I don't know. Maybe he does. I don't know.
And Clomid would be like
Yeah,
tablet-wise.
yeah. I don't remember the milligrams on those, but I would take that every day for about a week or so. Maybe like 3 to 4 tabs a day.
Do you think Novadex is a...
So that could be anywhere from 100 to 200 milligrams of Clomid if he's doing that many tabs.
useful occasionally?
Yeah, but I guess recently, like, started to believe that it's toxic, pretty toxic to your liver, and you know, it's not exactly what people thought it was at first. So, and also had some way of fighting against your natural growth hormone levels.
That's the same thing that Ronnie Coleman, well, if it was Ronnie, was talking about in the interview he did. So obviously these bodybuilders kind of like, you know, come talk and share theories with each other and stuff, because that was the exact same thing Ronnie was talking about, how Novadex hinders IGF-1. So interesting to hear that come up and how it's avoided in PCT intentionally because they think it's going to hinder IGF severely.
Yeah, I've heard that stated by a number of the guys, yeah.
So people start shying away from the Novadex, and I'm one of them.
Is there anything other blocking agent like that you would consider in replacing Novadex?
There is one. It's slipping my mind right now.
Proviron?
No, there's another one. It's a 50 milligram drug.
Oh, the T.
Teslac.
Yes.
Teslac.
You think that's a worthy substance?
Oh, yeah.
See, I don't know what that is either. Tesla? I don't even know. Maybe somebody in the comments knows. But there was the Cytogen. I had never heard of that before. And then Teslac or whatever. Never heard of that either.
It's really good.
And how long would you take that, the short duration?
Yeah, for the duration of your cycle. For the whole cycle, I would take that.
Oh, during the cycle?
Yeah.
Oh, I see. So if you're...
50 milligrams on up to 200 milligrams towards the end, close to competition.
And then do you just stop? Or do you get off slowly?
I
Or...
always get off slowly, and then I would just stop everything then.
So it's a 15-week cycle or something like that?
If you can get that much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it might be something up to
If you
that.
can only get one bottle this time, then you know, you can
deal with it.
that, yeah.
I understand. Did anything scary ever happen to you? That gave you an ill effect or even a look that wasn't...
Yeah, one time I ended up, I tried to inject it to my calves to see what would happen if they were...
Most nerve dense area, do not pin your calves. Just, I'm telling you.
You know, forward looking and you know, this and that, but I injected into it. It was, you know, really painful time, and it was
Even if you get it perfect, it's still going to cripple you probably just from the pain.
What was it you injected?
it was a regular testosterone.
Oh.
It wasn't even like not like a swelling size type thing.
Right.
But people nowadays are shooting like all over their bodies,
Yeah.
from biceps to
think about
triceps to. I think you really need to be for what you're doing, because you know you don't know what's under. You like, you know, you're shooting in the dark. You know, and it's really dangerous. You can hit some nerves or create some damage. You have no idea what you're gonna do. You know. But you know, some of my calf is. I don't know if the muscle is atrophied a little right there. So like the muscle's not really there anymore. So that was enough for me right there. I don't do anything like that anymore.
Some kind of tissue damage.
Yeah, tissue damage.
Might have been nerve damage. Now he can't get proper circulation or something like that there. I don't know. But it's a good reason why you shouldn't pin your calves. Not that I feel like many people do, but still. I know some people have tried doing like synthol protocols in their calves, and even that they've had to get like anatomy charts that show where the nerves run down their calves to make sure they pin in spots that aren't going to hit their nerves and stuff. And it's just seems way too intense for me and for like I feel like most people, but
It's not. It's not what I was meant to do.
If we float in now to just discuss food, okay? It's easy stuff now. I mean, how many calories do you eat a day?
Oh, that varies also, and I'm not a really big eater, but it could be. I've had 4,000 some calorie diets at times.
there, so that's like, it sounds like to him 4,000 is a lot. So that just goes to show again, a guy, top Olympia caliber competitor, doesn't need to eat 10,000 calories to grow, just like you don't need to. So it's just, at the end of the day, if you're in a surplus, you're going to gain muscle and some fat. And the more you overspill past that surplus of just unnecessarily cranking your calories up, you're just gaining more fat and not gaining more muscle. So don't overeat because you saw a diet in a magazine that says Jay Cutler eats 10,000 calories, because it's probably not the case.
For a contest that usually eats something closer to what?
As far as
Calories, total calories?
it's around. I eat more in contest than
More
in
for
off
contest?
season. Yeah.
When you're taking the GH, can you eat anything you want? I mean, do you eat ice cream, cake, cookies, candy, all kinds of stuff, and get in shape?
I tend to like a cookie or so.
So you can eat more.
I can eat more cookies per week. Yeah.
Okay.
Every couple of days, or sometimes every day, I gotta have a cookie.
Okay. So you'll eat more junk food, if you will, just to keep you from feeling wasted.
Keep your sanity. Yeah.
In regards to like normal off season versus on season, calories may change, but as far as ratios of protein, carbohydrates, and fats, do you record those things?
I've done it before, yes. Lately, I've just been going by what I see in the mirror. You know, if I wake up, I ate the day before, and I know how to repeat what I'm doing. And if I need to make change, then I would raise or lower my carbohydrates, or raise or lower my proteins.
In terms of grams, I mean, any idea how many grams of protein you consume a day, off season versus on season?
It can go up to like between 300 to 500.
Wow.
In the
Protein.
So many guys, they think, oh, everyone's eating too much protein. You gotta have like 0.6 grams per pound body weight or whatever, and 1 gram is more than enough. That's all you need. When you get into like, when you were talking about exogenous androgens and like increased levels of protein synthesis and like physiques of like 260 plus, studies are out the window at that point. Like, we're not talking about your natural guy and his ability to synthesize 30 grams per meal or whatever the science is saying. Like, we're talking about Olympia bodybuilders here, and they're eating like 300 to 500 grams of protein per day. And that's like, it seems pretty consistent. Like, that's what the other guys in the interviews are talking about, 400 plus as well. So it's funny because I always see comments in the comment section that like are trying to critique the bodybuilders and say they're eating too much protein and they're stupid. And it's like, well, dude, like that's what it takes at that level. Like, they're not 170 pound guys here trying to get to 5% body fat at 155, you know what I mean? So it's a bit of a different context, and like applying the, you know, the protein studies to these kind of guys is kind of out the window in my opinion.
300-500 grams of protein.
Right, of protein.
Okay, and then in the season.
During the season.
And then also in
Off
relation.
season is probably lowers more carbohydrates than off season.
I see.
Than anything, and then
So the carbohydrates actually go lower in season.
right.
So they would be like gram-wise.
Really low.
So that's pretty consistent, I feel like, where off season, if you were trying to build muscle, you know, you would increase your carbohydrate intake, lower your protein to accommodate, you know, that increase of carbs. Carbs are protein sparing, people know that. And then as you get, you know, deeper into a contest prep phase, you start to slowly lower your carbohydrates and increase your protein to retain tissue. So that's pretty consistent with what I've, you know, seen and learned over the years.
I'm not exactly sure gram-wise, because
Approximately.
there's really a few cups of rice in the morning, and then the evening a couple of potatoes or something like that. But
pretty low.
between there is just all protein.
That's like 8 weeks out?
And vegetables. From
Yeah.
at least, yeah.
Okay. And then fat, probably gram-wise,
Fat, I would consider it medium. I would eat steaks, and I also eat like avocados and even some like MCT oil, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. So the fat's more moderate as you would.
MCT oil is the oil that is in synthol, by the way, which is funny. I bet this guy doesn't know that, but well, maybe he does. I don't know. But it's funny when people like talk poorly about or like talk about this wonder drug synthol and how sketchy it is, and then it's literally just MCT oil.
As you would consider
Yeah, exactly. High protein, moderate fats, and low to medium carbohydrates.
Mm. So what I'm hearing from you used to count earlier on when you're early in your career. Now you go by instinct and feel.
Right.
Pretty much know. Interesting. It's almost like being an artist to some degree, isn't it? Sort of.
Yeah, you can, after a while, you can sort of, manipulate what your body's going to do just by what you eat the day before, and, those 2 days, and you're going to see a change.
Mm-hmm. The sport of bodybuilding is my neighborhood. It's where we come from, and I would never want to do anything to really,
That's something I recommend you guys if you're newbies, especially if it's your first couple of years, is like meticulously count macros, micros, and just overall calories, and learn how your body works inside out. And then eventually you get to a point like, this guy here where you can just eyeball your food and know exactly how your body's going to respond, like roughly. Like I can look at a piece of chicken right now that without even weighing it and tell you probably the exact within like 20 calories, how many calories it's going to be, how many grams of protein it's going to be, how much fat is in it, etc. And yeah, you got to learn your body inside out. Like that's my number one tip when it comes to dieting. But if you're just starting out, don't think that you can just eyeball stuff and figure it out, because that's how you're either A, never going to get shredded, or B, not grow sufficiently, or C, get fat as hell.
Damage or expose dirty laundry. My goal here is not to expose dirty laundry of our sport or anybody else's sport from this video, but merely to use as an educational source of material to where the up-and-coming guy can go, here's the way it really is, and here's somebody that's on top, and in fact, this guy's on top. You don't know who he is, but he's on top, okay? And he's telling you the way he really sees it, the way he really feels about it, and he does have concerns about his health, and in fact, all the guys I spoke to today have concerns about their health, and they're looking at it as a benefit to risk ratio, and it's what's necessary to do to compete in today's arena. Some guys felt that they needed to, it was getting too far out of hand, like with yourself, it was too far out of hand as it's getting crazy, and but most of the top guys seem to have a control. They're like not nuts as people, as much as the amateurs are who are viewing the pros, going, more is better. It's in fact, more is better to a point, as I'm hearing it most of the day, but it's like, I'm seeing it, there's a centeredness, and there's a regime and a focus and a controlled method of approaching the drugs, and you're concerned with health, and there is episodes you may have run into, you don't want to have that happen again, so you seek the advice about testing and doctors and so on, which is interesting, I think, for the fans should hear. I mean, the up-and-coming guys should hear that it's not just take everything you get your hands on and hope for the best,
Right.
But again, the reason we're doing this forum, I'm speaking to the audience at this point, the reason we're doing this is not to expose anyone, not to expose dirty laundry of any sport, especially the sport that we all come from, but to merely serve as an educational tool in hopes that there'll be less abusive procedures, maybe less use, at the point to where it's a healthier, cleaner approach to a sport in general. And I'm just to the point now where I don't want to see any more of my friends' lives endangered, mostly amateurs' friends' lives endangered. And I really am, some of you may disagree, but I'm very happy and pleased to address the issues in terms of honesty. And I think we should do more of that rather than just avoiding the issue and talking about the issue as if it doesn't exist. It does exist, and the various men you heard spoke today on this tape, I commend, and I thank very much for providing this insight into the reality of the sport, and hopefully we can make a difference, and we have made a difference in the way you see things. Thank you. very much for being here. Appreciate it.
Awesome. So that pretty much wraps up this series. Like, hopefully you guys found that as interesting as I did, as insightful, and just enlightening in general. You know, really puts things in perspective, and, you know, can check a lot of egos too. A lot of guys, they think the secret is just more is better, and, you know, my next cycle is gonna be the one that blows me up, and like blah blah blah. Then I'm gonna get a pro card. I'm gonna be at the Olympia, and it's like, if you can't get your pro card off of what these guys are taking, it's probably not in the cards for you. And I would, you know, I don't feel like this is a sport that's really worth, like, at least with like basketball and soccer and stuff, you can like play recreationally and enjoy it. But I mean, like, with bodybuilding, it's tough to just say like, yeah, you should like sauce your face off, because even if you're not going to be competing at a high level, like, there's no benefit to weighing 260 year round. So just put things in perspective, guys, and literally don't kill yourself trying to, you know, get these superhero physiques. If it's not in the cards for you, like, don't push your body past where they can handle. And you know, there's gonna be a lot of people that think these guys are lying because they want to underplay their use and not seem like they use so much and blah blah blah. But I don't know, frankly, I actually believe them, and I just think they're genetic anomalies who probably have like myostatin, you know, mutations, polymorphisms and whatnot, and things that their genetic makeup would literally, it would be impossible for you to replicate with no matter how much drugs you use. Like, there's certain things in your genetic code you just can't make up for. If your body produces a bunch of myostatin in response to androgens, like, and another guy doesn't, there's absolutely nothing you can do until, you know, new developments in drug, you know, pharmacology in the future come out. So anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this series. Drop a like, drop a comment if you enjoyed it. If you have any suggestions for other videos in the future, drop a comment too. Let me know what you guys want to see. Check out my blog, moreplatesmoredates.com. I am going to put up written versions of these videos there with transcripts, as well as timestamps, and it's going to be a bit of a long process to, you know, transcribe it all out. So that's going to probably be posted later than these videos are up, but just bear with me while I do that. And hope you guys enjoyed it. Follow me on Instagram at moreplates_more_dates. I post there daily almost. Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, etc. Check out the links in the video description below for affiliate links and stuff to support the channel. Talk to you guys soon.